All right, friends, Jason here again for another little bourbon video. Hope you enjoyed the other two. So we talked about what is a bourbon, basically what are the requirements to make a bourbon, and then the second video was kind of those label nuances. So those weird things we see on the label, bottled in bond, cask strength, all that good stuff. So we explained that a little bit. For this episode, if you want to call it that, never tried that before, but we'll call it that. We're going to talk about mash bills and why mash bills are important and why we want to understand those on our journey. So we're going to start with little Five Brothers. Well, we did mash bill from Heaven Hill. Not a bad pop there. They released this. It's been a couple years ago now. It's a distillery only release, and it's a little honor commemorative bottle to the Shapiro brothers, and they're the five brothers that founded Heaven Hill after Prohibition, and it's like a blend, I believe, of five different ages, ranging from 5 to 9, as a dedication to those Shapiro brothers. So yeah, good juice. I thought it was actually a limited release, and it was a come and gone when I actually got it years ago, but was just there a couple weeks ago, and it was on the shelf. And I guess it's kind of been designated as a distillery only release, so it's still there. I'm wondering now that I said that if they're doing batch numbers or if it was just one large batch, or it doesn't say, but maybe that new bottle would tell us. But wanted to revisit this one, and you all can get this at the distillery at Heaven Hill on the shelf. I think it was 55, 60 bucks, something like that. Really good juice. It's a wheated profile, and we're going to talk about that in just a few. And that is just as good as I remember it being. Actually, one of the better wheaters that I've had. And unfortunately, from what I can find, they don't release the mash bill on this. I mean, it's a blend of five, so maybe there's some variation in there, which is why they don't release it, or maybe they just thought they had a really good blend there, so they didn't release it. But it is, however, noted as a wheated mash bill, so that gives us a little bit of an idea at least. So on mash bills, why are they important? I mean, especially early on in our journey, early on in my journey, where there weren't a ton of videos to be had on mash bills and bourbon in general. I mean, this was 15, 16 something years ago when I got into bourbon, and we didn't have the whiskey tubers and the bourbon YouTube guys and all that we have nowadays. So I think it probably took me a while to figure out what mash bills were and what they meant. But it's kind of important getting into your journey because you want to understand what you like and what you don't like, because it doesn't break down to this distillery is different in that way, or the barrels aged on this hill in this county better because of that. I mean, yeah, there's nuances in all that stuff, but mash bill is going to be your biggest variation in every bourbon. And you're gonna discover that you might not like high rise, you might not like weeders, and unfortunately, if you don't understand mash bills, you're gonna find that out the hard way by buying a bottle, not liking it, and then going and buying a similar mash bill profile, and also going, shit, I don't like that either. And it's because you chose the same mash bill, and it's a mash bill that just doesn't work with your palate. So we'll talk about those. That way you can understand it and create a selection that's got what you like, and not a selection of things that you don't like. So let's get into it. Yeah, let's rock and roll. So what is a mash bill? So a mash bill are the grains that make up your bourbon, your whiskey. Um, Obviously, for a bourbon, we're going to be 51% corn by law. We've already talked about that. And there are a number of other grains that can go into your mash bill to create, that flavor, that texture, that profile that you're going to find that you love. So So what else is in there? Again, corn, obviously start. Rye. So rye is very controversial for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like rye spice. So that's why it's also important to understand mash bills. Your wheat, already said that, and then malted barley. So malted barley is a fun one, especially if you explore, other types of whiskeys, scotches, for example. You're going to learn a lot about malted barley there. But your corn, that backbone to our bourbon, your rye, something I'm going to mention just because I recently noticed it popping up and thought was kind of cool, is not always going to be unmalted. I've found one item in particular that I've seen lately that's got malted and unmalted rye in it, as well as malted barley. But yeah, so wheat, obviously, softness, sweetness to a bourbon, just the easy drinkability, and then malted barley is a very important component of almost every mash bill. I don't even think there's a mash bill that doesn't contain malted barley in bourbon. It provides those enzymes to break down the sugar, and make our juice what it is. So a quick little, I don't know, kind of differentiator or primer, whatever you want to call it, between wheat and rye, because there are two, those are our two big secondary grains in a mash bill, and those are the two that are going to really change that flavor one way or another. So your wheat, your soft, your bready, your sweet notes, your rye, that peppery, that spicy, that dry finish that you get on the back of your tongue. Um, Very important to understand those differences, because those are going to be the large makeup of those flavor profiles and what changes it to your liking or your dislike for the most part. So, and again, malted barley provides those enzymes for fermentation. Um, that's what converts those starches to sugars, and are a very small percentage of most of those mash bills, like 5 to 15%, something like that. Let's start with weeded. Again, that's what this guy is. Again, if I didn't give you a good enough look, Five Brothers there. Good stuff. So, a weeded mash bill is going to be corn as our number one ingredient, 51% at least. Wheat as our second ingredient, and then finished up with malted barley. So our wheat component in a weeded mash bill is going to be like 15 to 30%. Obviously, that number varies a little bit, but it's going to be your highest grain component as your number two component. So you're going to have that softer, sweeter, lower spice profile. Um, it's one that's become wildly popular. A lot of great weeders out there. This one to note. Your Maker's Mark is obviously a weeder. A lot of variations in that brand and that family. Larceny's a weeder. Bardstown released a weeded. It's become crazy popular. If you can find that, definitely recommend trying that. That one that everybody wants to chase, but please don't overpay, is those Pappy Van Winkles. That's a weeder. So yeah, that gives you a little idea. Understand. Have some of those in that category. See if you like them, and that way hey, cool, I like weeders. Again, high corn, high wheat, and a low percentage of malted barley. You're not going to see rye in this profile. I mean, if you did see rye, it'd be a very low percentage, and that would take be a 4 grain. But corn, wheat, malted barley, and yeah, it's kind of a softer, more delicate, sweeter bourbon. Your traditional bourbon is going to be a low rye, so you are going to have some rye in there. So you're looking at corn, rye, malted barley, and yeah, it's going to give you that. I don't know what you'd say other than just classic bourbon taste. Actually that Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond that we talked about in our last video is a traditional low rye recipe. What else? Beam White Label, which is, you can fight me on this, but one of my favorites in terms of making a cocktail if I want to use bourbon. Elijah Craig Small Batch is another one. So a lot of those just I like bourbon, like your traditional stuff. That's what those recipes are. Smaller amount of rye, so you're not getting all that extra spice. Um, yeah, easy sippers, just a great all around style. So if you're into bourbon and you don't like the traditional low rye recipe, I don't know how you like bourbon. So definitely try some of those, understand those. I'm not saying go get Jim Beam White Label and sip it neat, but you know, explore that category, understand if you like them or not, see what it is there that you like versus what you don't like. And then high rye, one of my favorites. I don't know. I'm not a. I do have a sweet tooth, but when I'm having a drink, I don't like it sweet. So if I'm having a mixed drink, I'm going for light on the sweetness. Even when I like to drink a bourbon and ginger ale or a bourbon and Sprite, something to sip through. That's I can drink a few of them and enjoy it. I'm typically going with a what am I trying to say? Sprite Zero or a ginger ale that's no sugar or sugar alternative. Just that extra sweetness just doesn't do it for me. So a high rye bourbon pulls that sweetness down because it's adding that high amount of rye in it, and really makes for a great cocktail, great mixed drink, whatever it is. So with a high rye mash bill, you're looking at 20 to 35% rye. Obviously, give or take a few points there. But it's just a higher rye content. It says high rye, and it's bolder, spicier. Again, that dry finish that you might experience. You might get some black pepper, some baking spices, more of a bite. Best way to explain it. It's got more of a bite to it. And if you explore, rye whiskeys as a whole, pick up a Sazerac rye or Sagamore makes some great rye. Whistle Pig makes some great ryes. You'll quickly see the difference between a rye and a bourbon, and the role that rye plays in a bourbon mash bill. Just more bite to it, more spice to it. You don't have those sweet notes with a rye. So some good examples of high rye recipe are like your Bullets. Wild Turkey 101's a high rye recipe. Old Grandad. Um, what else? Four Roses single barrel, I think. Pretty sure I'm on that. Double check me if I'm wrong. Drop it in the comment. But yeah, high rye is definitely one of those categories that you want to understand, because if you like those smooth, sweet, mellow, easy sippable flavors, and you hit that high rye and you just don't like that spice, you don't like that bite, um, you're you're gonna you might make that mistake of buying a second bottle that's also a high rye recipe and discovering the hard way that you don't like that profile. So definitely try some of these out in each category, understand them, and understand what you don't like about them, so you don't make the mistake of putting too many on your shelves and having them just sit there because you don't like them. More recently, 4 grain has become a thing. I think Penelope is almost everything they're releasing now is a 4 grain, and it's definitely a unique category on its own. So obviously, 4 grain. It's got 4 grains in it. So you've got corn, rye, wheat, and malted barley, and you're gonna see some nuances, some differences in there. Adding all of those components, it's going to be a more complex, a more textured, um, just a just a different just a different bourbon. You're gonna obviously still be high corn, your rye and your wheat and your malted barley. Malted barley is still going to be the lower of the four, but your rye and wheat are going to be a little heavier, matching together in there. And I recently saw that Penelope F Cancer It's got malted rye and unmalted rye. Did I say that right? Malted and unmalted. So I need to try that one out. I want to check it out. And if you're not familiar with the word malted, um, so malted is when that grain is allowed to germinate. So it's started to germinate. We've halted the germination of it, and then we've mashed it in. So you've got, typically malted barley, unmalted rye, and this one in particular has both malted rye and unmalted rye. So you can get some uniqueness in those four grains. So definitely check some of those out. Penelope has a lot of four grain stuff. I'm dying to try that F Cancer one out. Old Elk's got some four grain stuff. So definitely recommend checking those out. Seeing what weird stuff can be done with four grains as opposed to just three for our typical, for sure. I think my favorite part of these videos that I'm making for you all is that I just get to sit here and sip on some bourbon, especially stuff that I haven't tried in a while and got an excuse to because I tell you about it. What's next? That we've really covered a lot of it. We've covered the mash bills, some examples of each. So we've got weeders, we've got traditional, we've got high rye, we've got four grain. For our weeded category, it's your Makers, your Pappies, your Heaven Hill Five Brothers, your traditional, your Jim Beam, your Knob Creek, Old Forester, High Rye, um, Bullet, Four Roses, Wild Turkey, and then the four grain stuff. Got a couple cool options there to try out. I need to explore the four grain category more. I've only had a couple, and they're definitely complex and different. Need to definitely try some more of those. Um, but yeah, I think it's a good little breakdown of mash bills. We're staying strictly in the bourbon world, so those are the mash bills that make up the different iterations of bourbon that we're going to see on the shelf. Mash bills go, you know, across the board, different countries very differently for our whiskeys in particular. Outside the U.S., it's a lot of malted barley. There are some cereal grains, in scotches and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, understand those mash bills is, I mean, even just for enjoying bourbon is one thing, but exploring outside of bourbon and the other whiskey categories, it's important. I mean, we're really going to determine what we like and what we don't like, and why we like those things. So, understanding the flavors, what they bring to our palate, and it's always going to be different. It's you know, even if yeah, go grab me a little Debbie, I'm going to enjoy it. But when I'm having a bourbon, I don't want sweet stuff. So, thinking you just like sweet stuff, so you're going to like a weeder more, or a rye less, whichever. You're you're not necessarily, you know, doing yourself justice until you really try each of those categories out and explore each of them individually to understand the sweetness, the spice, the nuances that all of them provide. So, excuse me. So definitely explore each of the categories, understand the differences. That way, make the best of your bourbon journey. I think that's about it for today. For our next video, I've got a couple ideas. Haven't decided exactly which one I want to talk about yet. So we'll get into that soon. As for this one, I think I've given you a good little recap. Mash bill, simply the recipe. What's going into that? What's going into that bourbon? It's going to allow you to understand what you like, what you don't like, and forewarning, it's not going to always determine what you like and what you don't like, because you're going to get into it and you're going to still discover some brands or some distilleries that you're just like, I just don't like what they have to offer. And even though it's a mash bill similar to, something that might be your favorite, you're still not going to love it necessarily. So it gives you a good basis, but there's definitely some nuances in there, aging and types of char on aging, all that good stuff that you know does change our profile. But mash bill is the basis of it, and it's gonna closely get us into types of bourbon we like the most. So that's all I got for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the other two. If you haven't watched the other two and you're somehow watching this one, go back and watch those two and drop comments, drop suggestions, questions, whatever you got. Love to hear them. Love to talk about more. If you got an idea for a video that you really want to talk about, or something that's not been covered by anybody that you've seen, heard, whatever, let me know. We'll talk about it. Cheers.